I am terrified of the dark. Always have been. But it wasn't until I moved into my first apartment that I realized how real my fear actually was. It was a small one-bedroom place with hardwood floors and really high ceilings. The walls were this ugly yellow, so I painted them a nice calming blue.
Yes.
I put in a few pictures and hung up some fairy lights to give it some character. It was nothing fancy, but it was home. I even got a big fluffy rug to put in front of the closet, which was huge. It had this long wooden pole in the middle, which I assumed was for hanging clothes. I didn't know at the time that it was actually meant to be a place for me to store my greatest fears. That night I went to bed early, but something kept me awake. I could feel my heart beating in my ears, and every little creak of the house sounded like footsteps or someone clearing their throat. Finally, I drifted off, only to be awoken by what sounded like a cat screeching in pain. I sat up in bed frozen, staring at the closet door, waiting for whatever made the noise to come out. But nothing did. Eventually, I fell back asleep, and everything was fine until the next morning when I heard the sound again. This time it was during the day, though, and I told myself that it was probably just a bird stuck in the chimney or something. One afternoon, about a week later, I was sitting on the couch reading a book when I heard it again, the sound that had woken me up in the middle of the night. I set my book down and listened intently. It came from the closet. I walked over and hesitantly opened the door, expecting to find a stray cat or a mouse, but there was nothing there. It was just an empty, dusty closet filled with cobwebs. I shut the door and went back to my book, but the sound started coming from the closet again. I tried to ignore it, but it grew louder and more guttural. It sounded like a strangled animal, something big and wet and angry. I stood up slowly, keeping my eyes locked on the closet door, and I took a deep breath and slowly opened it. Inside was darkness, thick and suffocating like a physical presence. As my eyes adjusted, I began to make out shapes in the gloom. Cobwebs stretched between the hanging clothes like a tightrope walker's high wire. Then in the corner, something glistened under the dim light filtering in through the cracks in the door. I took a step forward and the floor creaked, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. As I continued toward the corner, the sound stopped.
Ow.
Whatever had been trapped in there had gone silent. As I reached for the doorknob, my fingers brushed against something sticky and wet. I recoiled in disgust and shone my phone's flashlight into the closet. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a pair of men's dress shoes caked in mud. My blood ran cold. Why would a previous tenant leave such large, muddy shoes in the closet? Was someone hiding in here? Had he left them as a warning, or maybe an offering to whatever lurked in the shadows? The shoes weren't the only thing in the closet. I found a leather jacket and a wide-brimmed hat, both covered in the same thick layer of mud. I carefully pulled the hat onto my head. It smelled faintly of mildew and old earth. The moment I did, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I ripped it off my head and tossed it back into the darkness. I needed to get out of there. I don't know what kind of sicko was living here before me, but I didn't want to stick around to find out. Suddenly, the sound I had been hearing started again. It was right behind me. I whirled around, knocking over a full-length mirror. The glass fell to the floor with a deafening crash, sending shards skittering across the wooden floor. I backed away, my eyes wide with terror. But it was too late. Whatever had been trapped in the closet was now free. It lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. I screamed and scrambled backward, knocking over my dresser in the process. Its hot, fetid breath washed over me as it leaned closer. I could see its eyes, glowing embers in the darkness. I don't remember what it looked like because the next thing I knew, I was running. I raced through the house, not daring to look back. I fumbled for the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stumbled outside, I glanced back at the window. The creature was standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light spilling from inside the house. It took a step toward me, then another. I turned and ran, tripping over tree roots and leaping over cracks in the sidewalk. I didn't dare slow down, not until I reached my car. Safe inside, I slammed the doors and rolled up the windows. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my keys, my mind racing. What was that thing? Why was it in my closet? How did it get out? I threw the car into reverse, backing out of the driveway as fast as I could. I didn't stop driving until I reached my friend's house. She let me stay with her for a few days, until I could get back into my apartment and get my things. But the police never found anything. No signs of forced entry, no stolen items, no trace of the creature in the closet. Even the muddy shoes were gone. They had apparently been sitting in the closet for months, maybe years, and nobody had ever noticed them before. I eventually moved back into my apartment, but I couldn't bring myself to open that closet door. I kept my clothes in plastic bins and moved in with a roommate. To this day, I can still hear the sound of its breathing in my nightmares. I haven't moved out yet, but every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that closet facing my worst fears.